pleased to bring you our feature presentation.
All right, hello everyone. Welcome back to another Beta Alpha Psi meeting. Today we have Brian McCarthy from Thoroughbred Advisors coming to speak to us today. Again, please give him your undivided attention. Let's make this a very interactive session. And for members and candidates after the meeting, please stay behind. We have a couple announcements regarding next week. So please do stay behind. So with that being said, Brian, I will let you take it away from here. Thanks, Joe.
All right, so good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to be back on campus. And again, thanks, Jack, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to speak here. To Jack's point, if I could ask to make this as interactive as possible, and I say that selfishly because I speak to people all day. I'm actually going to teach a class this evening after we go ahead and wrap up here as an adjunct professor here at FDU. So the less that I have to talk, honestly, the better, and the more that we can make it conversational, I think it'll be informative. So why don't I hope this keeps on paying attention. Yeah. All good. All right. Let me tell you a little bit about who I am, why I'm in front of you today, and, perhaps where I can go ahead and kind of give you some insight. So, again, Brian McCarthy, Managing Director at Thoroughbred Advisors. I'm an FDU class of 05 graduate. It's always interesting coming back to the Madison campus because even though I'm, the gross old age of 41, I still feel like a student coming in, walking by public safety and, fearing I'm going to go ahead and get in trouble for something that I did, 20 years ago. But it's always nice to be, back on campus. And, coming to FDU was one of the best decisions that I frankly ever made, aside from what was a tremendous education, a incredible campus experience, and some of the friends and connections that I've made over the years. Actually starting my career wouldn't have been possible without FDU and leveraging the career services. So a little shout out to them. I'm talking to Jack, I'm sure many of the folks there are probably long gone from since I graduated in 2005, but I got several internships throughout my career there. And then, what led to my first job into, what would become my career on Wall Street started because I didn't know what the heck I was doing before I graduated. I had a very poorly written resume, shall we say, needed a lot of help, was able to get that and got an internship at a small independent planning firm, right over on Route 10, 15 minutes here from campus. And, it's what started an incredible journey. Little bit about my resume aside from what I'm doing now. So I was a business finance major. I've been in finance my whole career. Next year will be my 20th year in the industry. It's been primarily focused on the financial planning side. As I said, I started out with small independent planning firm before eventually moving to what became, Morgan Stanley through, a couple different acquisitions where I spent the bulk of my career, which I'll go ahead and talk about, some of the observations and, key things that I've had. From there, spent a good chunk of time there before more recently moving into Thoroughbred, where I run my own financial planning practice and have a team of 10 financial advisors that I go ahead and work with. I'm very fortunate, again, like I said, to have, the experience within, FDU, both in terms of the, education that I received here, as well as, some of the opportunities, to really expand. And it gave me a really interesting perspective, right? In terms of, especially as I, moved into a big Wall Street bank where, there's a lot of, frankly, Ivy League level students and who eventually, come through there. And I was, I found myself able to hang with them and able to, compete with them for, different levels of positions and, how to navigate a career. So I'm really thankful for the opportunity. So it's great to speak to, fellow soon to be FDU grads, although I know you said there's, some freshmen, some sophomores, there's a number of different ranks that will go ahead and join, but you've set yourself up for a tremendous opportunity long-term. Also shout out to those of you who have or are interested. I was talking to Jack beforehand. I also did my semester at Roxton. If you get the opportunity to do that, highly recommend. And I think I'll stop doing the FDU commercial now and talk about my development. So, look, in terms of what's interesting, right, is as you're sitting in the student seat, it's hard to think about what your career journey is going to be. And, I'll talk about something that you need to prepare for, but what I always find as kind of, a hokey question. So I know I can't see everyone raising hands, but how many who have, if you've been on an interview, have gotten the question, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Okay, I see a couple of folks, right? Now, I hate that question. Aside from the fact that it's a lazy interview technique. But I've been fortunate enough that if you asked me 5 years ago what I'd be doing in my career, would I be doing exactly what I'm doing? Would I be doing at the level that I'm at? I would have had no idea. And that's been a constant theme throughout my entire career in terms of finding opportunities, expanding, what I've been able to accomplish. But it's something where having a vision and having a path is going to be necessary to identify structure and to identify where you want to go ahead and navigate. Now, I hate it as an interview question because it's a lazy interview question that they're just trying to go ahead and see like, hey, have you given any thought to the prospective job? So I always go ahead and say, and what I would tell people to answer that interview question is, how do you want your friends and family to describe what it is that you do? Right? And not just today, but 5 years in the future, 10 years in the future, 20 years in the future. And so if you think about what you want to achieve, and again, especially for freshmen and sophomores on this, you may be thinking, I'm just trying to figure out what class or what dorm I'm going to be in next semester. It's a lot to think about, but just something to, as you go in your professional development and as you go through your professional career, something that you'd want to go ahead and consider. In terms of actual career advice, I've held many different job titles, even though, again, I was with one firm for the bulk of my career. But I was fortunate to have many different roles. And it felt like every 2 years I was being tapped on the shoulder or being promoted or given an opportunity. And the one career advice that, there's someone in the waiting room. There we go. Okay. One bit of career advice I could give everyone, right, is hard work always trumps talent. Okay. And I'll follow that up with, if you can find the problem that no one wants to solve, you will become that much more valuable to whatever employer, whether it's your own business, whether it's a major publicly traded company, you will find value and you will make a name for yourself. Okay. It's funny. I was trying to think of stories that I could tell legally here. In terms of, what I could get away with some of my previous employers. And I'll share one where when I first started at Morgan, I worked in kind of a back office, middle office support. So when financial advisors would call in and either look for market updates or reporting information or some of these other additives that they could provide for their clients. And one of these advisors who would call in was rather feisty, I think is the polite way of putting it. And it actually got to a point where the other folks in our team would actually file HR complaints against him because he was that disruptive. And there was maybe 3 people in the entire unit who can handle him. I was one of them. And it left an impression. Now, this guy, he would call in 4-letter words aplenty, trying to make things happen as quickly as possible. And finally, I started giving it back to him one time. I won't use his name, not that anyone here would know him, but I said, hey, am I going to be able to solve this for you right this second? No. I go, it's going to take me 48 hours, right? Yes. Have I ever let you down? No. Do you trust me to get this done? Yes. So why are you yelling at me? It's a good point, right? And leaving that mark and being able to just take on, all right, I'm going to get yelled at, big deal. Right? I'm in a high pressure situation. I'm in a high pressure opportunity. Within 6 months, I was promoted manager to my own unit. Right? Finding those opportunities is a definitive way to find success. Similar concept, but a little bit different pivot. I've been very fortunate to have some really successful mentors who have led to my own success. A bit of career advice that he gave me was make yourself obsolete. And when you think about that, it's kind of counterintuitive, right? So what tends to happen if you get into the corporate world is people will try to hold on to their position in their workload and they're always afraid to get fired or laid off. And especially in, today's world where, it's no longer the great resignation that was, 2-3 years ago. Sorry for those entering the workforce in the next 18 months. Sorry. But when you're at that point and you don't think of like, wait, why would I do something that's going to get rid of my job? And a smart boss, a smart leader will recognize, hey, if you've improved the efficiency of some component, you're probably going to be able to identify another opportunity that's going to make you that much better, right? And they'll be able to kind of pivot you to solve another problem throughout. So I would always just try to find ways like, hey, what are the pain points of my team and my unit, right? Whether it's operational, whether it's driving revenue, whatever it may be, what can I do to kind of resolve that? So let me pause for a second. I'm going to take a sip of water and rehydrate here, but thoughts, questions, anything top of mind by anyone in attendance of, things that you've come across or anything that I could take a deeper dive into. I thought there's a bunch of business majors. What are we doing being shy? That's a-okay. So, and any questions? I don't see anyone. Feel free to come off mute. All right, I'll keep going and talk about some of the other things that I've seen, right? So I've had, a very interesting, time and career paths, right? So between starting my college career, literally the week of September 11th, as I was saying to Jack, I don't know how many, if any of you were even alive during that time, right? Which is crazy to think about nowadays, but going through that, working through, kind of my first or second job out of school through the 2008 recession, having gone through, COVID and the market changes. I know for many of you, you were certainly possibly students here, but high school, maybe some grade school for some folks, right? In terms of that, and seeing that from a professional perspective and how it's changed, in the working world and the things that kind of we look for in career development and whatnot. So I guess let me again as someone who again managed to avoid getting laid off and actually got promoted during the 2008 crisis. Again, just identifying opportunity and getting to not just a point of survival, but a point of success. When people ask me, what do I look for in someone when I'm hiring, like when I'm hiring a new advisor that I'm, bringing onto my team, or when I was, hiring someone back, when it was a more corporate role, the things that I look for, right? And, I mentioned the hard work aspect, but I also look for, someone who has a creative edge. And what do I mean by that is that I want someone who is going to point out some of the things that I might be missing, right? Now, do I have a pretty big ego? Yes, I'm standing in front of a computer and I'm going to lecture for however long we're going to have a conversation. I'm going to lecture a bunch of other financial advisors starting at 6 o'clock for 3 straight hours on options and quantitative analysis, and my head already hurts thinking about it, right? So I certainly have an ego, but as my wife likes to remind me on a consistent basis, I don't know everything and often know nothing. And I certainly don't have a full perspective on everything. So being able to have someone who's not afraid to go ahead and in a polite and professional way, of course, to say, hey, why do we do things a certain way? And if anyone ever tells you, well, that's the way we've always done it, you're not working for a good manager. Okay, so little corporate advice there. That's when you know you need to find your next opportunity. If your manager ever says, this is the way we've always done it. It's never the answer you want to go ahead and hear. What you want is the manager who will go ahead and say, well, tell me why you think that is. Okay. And what I would always go ahead and tell my folks as a leader is to say, look, I will always take your opinion under advisement. I may not adhere to it because it's my responsibility as a leader to identify success. But if you're willing to go ahead and make that step up and do so in a thoughtful approach, you're going to offer more value and more capability. And by the way, that leader should give you more responsibility, more opportunity to go ahead and succeed. Another thing I'll always go ahead and say is, and I know several of you are taking advantage of FDU's 5-year MBA program. Good job on that. I personally did not take advantage of that, which I kind of regret every day just because I want more letters after my name. But always continue to learn and always know that you don't know everything, right? It's okay to be humble. It's okay to have some humility when it comes to, being better at what it is that you do. I am constantly striving for more information, right? And it's one of the things that keeps me active with my clients, for example, is because I understand what's going on in the stock market. I understand what's going on in the business world. Jack, you and I, we were briefly talking politics, which I'm going to mostly avoid, at least in terms of personal opinion. Although, if you do want some election and tax legislation insight, I'd be more than happy. And yes, I could talk about that. But in terms of that, I'm constantly absorbing new information. And if you ever think you know it all, you don't. And if you are constantly ready to improve yourself, again, you're going to be far more successful and far more valuable wherever you go, whether striking it out on your own or as being part of a larger team. So let me see. I thought I had a question there. Any questions, comments on that? Well, let me pull the group for a second, right? If I was to ask you, right, just as a group, could be anyone, okay, what do you think your biggest area of improvement that you would have from right now, if you were either talking to me or someone else who was hiring for whatever your career is? And I recognize like some of you may be marketing majors, accounting majors, and not necessarily finance professionals like me, but what do you think, or where do you feel would be your biggest opportunity?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being with us. I would say for me, maybe being better at storytelling. I feel like it is very important. I've been noticing like as far as kind of like pitch a stock or even kind of like sell myself, I need to improve in my storytelling. And that's something I would like to. I'm a second language. English is the second language. So I wish I was as fluent as in my native language or having the same storytelling, because I noticed that in Spanish I have like great storytelling, but I wish I had that in English. And I think that's something I would really would like to work.
So that's a great point, Elliot. Thank you for jumping on and saying that. So I have two observations for you. First is, I would actually, if I were you don't have to take my advice on it, but just unsolicited advice, I would take that language barrier and actually use it as a form of armor for yourself. And you can actually use that to an advantage, right? Because people, they'll obviously hear an accent, they'll hear an engagement, and they'll have a different thought process, but you can 100% already turn someone on their heels. And you can even make a comment of, well, I know that English is my second language, and then go ahead and have a referral to it, right? So you can actually use that as a strength. Don't look at that as a weakness. Look at it as opportunity. So that's number one. But number two, for everyone else, so storytelling and having anecdotes, certainly it's a part of what I do every day, because I'm in a client-facing role and basically in a sales role, in a more direct way to put it, and putting things in terms that people understand is a vital part of what I do on a day-to-day basis. What I would tell you, and this is going to sound really weird from an educational standpoint, but it's actually be really helpful to you, is study stand-up comedians. Now, I'm sure no professor is actually probably going to tell you here to go ahead and go home, fire up Netflix, and start binging stand-up comedy specials. But there's a reason I tell you that. And Jack's he's trying so hard not to go ahead and laugh at me right now, but I stand by it. And the reason I say that is when you take a look at stand-up comedy as an art form, and by the way, I actually train my new team members on this. And there's a reason why. If you follow a stand-up comedy routine, so whether it's, who's the big one amongst your age demographic right now is, okay, whether it's Joe Rogan, Dave Chappelle, Sebastian Maniscalco. I'm trying to throw out names that are relevant, but I'm older than dirt now, so I'm not even cool. My son calls me a noob all the time. It's depressing. Regardless, go to whomever your favorite comedian is, and I want you to listen, because it sounds like they're riffing and they're having a live conversation, but every word, every story that they have is scripted. They time it out. There's a format in the stand-up comedy industry called a tight five, which is a 5-minute set. So they tell either a series of jokes or a joke story over the course of 5 minutes, and they practice it and they get it down to a routine. They also do things where they take certain pauses to allow the audience to absorb and applaud and laugh, right? And to let them digest the joke for a second. They'll sit there, they'll use the power of silence. So if you go ahead and watch and see how they craft a narrative, and it has a story arc to it, and then it comes to the conclusion, which in their case is a punchline, you'll actually learn how to incorporate narratives into what you do. Now, the other side of this, and the last piece, Elliot, to conclude on this part is, don't let the details get in the way of a good story, right? Now, I'm not saying outright lie. Let's be clear. We're not saying tell fabrications, but if the story takes place over the course of a week and you truncate it down to be about 3 days, is that really the end of the world? Does it really change the impact of your story? No. Right? Even my story about, the FA, yelling at me and using 4-letter words, which he did. He did yell at me. He did use 4-letter words. Was it really as bad or as aggressive as it was? At least I didn't think so. But if I exaggerate a little bit, it makes it resonate more with you, and you can have a better emotional connectivity with it, right? So make sure that what you're saying and what you're communicating, both in terms of the tone and the arc of your story, along with the words, lands. And if you have to clean up a few details along the way, it's not the end of the world, right? So again, those 3 things. Elliot, in your case, you use your language as a tool to your advantage, right? Which I think is a great opportunity for you. Follow a structure and routine as you're crafting your narrative, and again, clean it up to make sure it makes sense. So great question for that.
Thank you so much for your advice.
My pleasure. What else? What other career advice can I give you folks?
So sorry, someone going up back there?
Yeah, Andrew, I'll get to you in a second. I'm sorry, I didn't get your name before. Juan. So the question was, what have I done differently than my peers throughout my career, other than be really devilishly handsome, charming, and funny? See, that's the joke. No, look, anyone who has found success in their career and tells you that there aren't elements of luck and being in the right place at the right time is totally lying to you, right? So let me tell you a story, right? So here, we're getting onto a telling the story narrative, right? I was working at City Smith Barney during 2008 financial crisis, okay? If anyone, and I know we were talking about the stock market trading, if anyone's seen what the price of Citigroup has done since 2007, it's one of the few stocks that never came back. And I'm not trying to speak ill of my former employer there, but their entire business model changed 17 years ago, 16 years ago. I was very fortunate that I was not let go when thousands upon thousands of people ended up without a job, without a home. What I did differently, I worked my tail off, number one, right? And I will say, especially when you're younger and early in your career, you're going to put in a lot of time, a lot of effort if you want to find success. Now, there are careers where you can go ahead and punch in, punch out, but in the business world, and I tell this to folks who are joining my team, are there any tech billionaires who go ahead and work 6 hours a week and have a successful startup company? Probably not, unless they're doing something criminal, right? Like what's his face, who we won't mention, who was off in the Bahamas playing League of Legends during shareholder calls, right? Okay, so expect to work your tail off. There is nothing in this world that can replace quality hard work. It's number one. Number two, the impact of building a network outside of your inner circle. So one of the things that, and by the way, this offer stands for everyone on this call without hesitation. So please send out my contact information when we wrap up here, Jack. One thing I was always taught, and I saw it firsthand, was every leader, every mentor will make 15 minutes available for you no matter what. Okay, so again, going back to when I was with Wall Street, if I wanted to talk to a C-suite managing director level, I knew that I could email, get 15 minutes, have a coffee chat. Now, I always made sure I had a purpose. I had a list of questions and what was my result and follow-up. So there was a level of organization and professionalism that I brought into it, but I always expanded to people outside of my primary kind of, silo. And that actually allowed me to explore and say, what you do is really interesting. How does someone work on your team? How do I get a job on your team? Right? How do I do that? And even if I never worked for that person, I at least had an idea of, okay, these are the traits that are important. Why don't I go ahead and emphasize that and improve it? By the way, what I would end up doing later on in my career is, as I started to move up and find success, is that when I had people coming through my funnel and they wanted to explore other opportunities, I could actually shuttle them off to go into, these other, and be like, hey, you should really hire this person. They're really talented. And I had built up a relationship with them. So even if I didn't work with them directly, I still had a quality relationship. Plus, if you need a favor, and in the business world, you will always need a favor. I am waiting to see how many voicemails I have from when we walk out of here from clients and people in my back office of things that I've called in to be like, hey, can we get this, trade through? Can we get this policy through? Can we get this through? So breaking out of your silo. I think all of that, along with, again, constant improvement, constant education, all of those tee you up and lead to success. Again, yes, there's an element of luck. Yes, there's an element of, being attached to the right person. There's a saying that we have is having the right rabbi, who's going to kind of promote you and highlight you and shine. And you have to be thoughtful in that. The other side of it too, and this is going to sound really weird, having spent 14 years at one firm, is don't worry about hopping around early in your career. Okay, so this is going to be counterintuitive advice to what a lot of people will go ahead and say, but I'm going to say things a little bit differently here. So early on in a resume, it is not abnormal for me now to go ahead and see successful professionals who have had stints 2-3 years at a company. Now, if someone's only staying 6 months at a firm, 3 months at a firm, that's a red flag. But if someone put in 2-3 years, it's not a shock to me, right? To go ahead and move. Don't be afraid to look out for what's best for you and look for that next opportunity, right? Now, I'm personally very money motivated. That's me. I imagine most people on a business fraternity call would also be money motivated, but I recognize it's also not the main motivator for some people. But especially early in your career, if you're trying to get that advancement, a lot of times you have to go ahead and switch firms. There was a lot of times I would tell folks on my own team who were talented, look, there's no opportunity for you to get that next promotion. But if you go across the street to a different competitor, you might actually have an opportunity. Plus, it never hurts to go ahead and see what your own self-worth is, to say, hey, am I really, because I've had plenty of people. I'll tell you a funny story. I had one gentleman work for me, and he would go ahead and say, hey, I'm not paid enough. Right now, of course, I had no control over what the pay scale was. This was decided 5-6 levels above me. So I famously opened my desk drawer, which was purposely empty, and I go, oh, here's your raise in here. Oh, wait, no, it isn't, right? And close the desk drawer. Never said I wasn't a jerk, by the way, Jack. You can laugh, guys. It's okay. It's a conversation. But I flat out told him, I go, find the next job that you want to go to. And if they're going to pay you $20,000 a year more at the time, go for it. God bless, because the opportunity just isn't going to be here for you, right? It's better for you to do that on your own rather than have your manager tell you to do that. That's usually your manager telling you like, hey, you're on the list. But it never hurts just to have an understanding of, like, okay, I love the firm that I'm with. I get recruiter calls all the time saying, hey, do you want to go ahead and move your practice over to this firm or do whatever? And I politely decline. But I still pick up the phone to go ahead and say, hey, what's someone going to go ahead and offer? what someone, is there something that you're going to go ahead and change? By the way, part of my job is recruiting other advisors, and I look for pain points. Okay. So just keeping that in mind, that don't be afraid to shop your services and to have that, and it will help propel you. Plus it'll give you new opportunities, new cultures, new ways of seeing things, right? Part of what makes me good at what I do now is, yes, I have that big bank experience, but I can bring that to, a smaller independent firm like I have right now, to where, okay, I know this is what matters. This doesn't matter. Here's where I can realistically complain about it. Here's what's better. Here's what's worse. And I can, kind of have that experience and that foresight that makes me much more valuable to wherever I land. Andrew, I'm sorry making you wait, but please feel free to answer or ask your question.
Yeah, so my question was just gonna be, I have a kind of a uniquer background. I'm doing finance with a computer science minor. I was
Sure.
kind of just gonna ask about how I can sell myself to other people, having kind of a more of a different perspective on the finance realm using my computer science.
So I'm going to answer your question with a question to start. Sorry, but I want, tell me more. Tell me more about
Yeah.
what makes you unique and what makes you different.
Yeah, so I use Python and C++ to build kind of like algorithms in a sense, and I use these to track the stock market and I make investments through it. So that's pretty much what I do, and I don't know, it's just kind of more of a different route than most people go in the finance. So it's kind of, I don't really know how to like explain it to people very well.
Okay, so I think I have an understand. So let me put this in words that I understand it, and you tell me if I'm wrong, right? So you are a mad scientist, right, who's creating different computer algorithms, and you're using it to be able to find advantages in the stock market and potentially make more money than a typical benchmark. Is that close?
Yeah, kind of, but it's kind of like I'm building like financial models and like other applications to analyze the market, and yeah, so
Okay.
kind of.
So have you ever read the book, The Man Who Beat the Stock Market? Okay. So here's everyone's takeaway. If you do nothing else, great. Here's a guest speaker coming in and telling you to read more books. Hooray. But read a book. It's called the Man Who Beat the Stock Market. It's about a firm out in Long Island called Renaissance Technologies. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of that. Give me like a thumbs up or a high sign or something if anyone's heard of that. No, Renaissance. So, okay. Let me just tell you a little bit about them, Andrew, and then I'll explain why I'm even mentioning it, right? So Renaissance Technologies is its own sort of hedge fund, alternative investment, private equity. And they do everything through math. Okay, so it's all PhD rocket scientists, and they created a hyper frequency trading algorithm that has net of fees, I think, average something like 37% rate of return. So they find arbitrage trading strategies, right? And for those, I was assuming everyone knew arbitrage, and I remember there's some younger folks. Arbitrage just means that you can buy the exact same thing on a different index for cheaper and then immediately sell it for a profit on another index. Okay. Usually those opportunities vanish like this because prices manage themselves up. They figured out how to go ahead and identify those and super high frequency trade them to pretty much guarantee a profit. The fund is now closed to outside money. Just the founders and the current employees manage it, but they were some of the first ones. So first and foremost, I think that would be an interesting read for everyone on this, but particularly someone like you, Andrew, and to how they developed their algorithm and what they did to go ahead and build that. The second thing is when you're talking about kind of marketing who you are and what you're doing, obviously the first thing you're going to do is point it out on your resume, right? The one thing I would make sure that you're doing is if you're getting positive results, let's you and I talk offline just in general. But more importantly, I'll give you another real world story of someone who I had, which is to be careful about how you position it, because your brand and your reputation is everything. So here's the story, and here's why I'm emphasizing this, right? So I was interviewing a potential candidate to join my team as an advisor. He was with a different big bank. I won't say which bank. And he puts on his resume, made $2 million trading his personal assets. Okay. And I'm like, that's awesome. Right now, of course, I have to dive into that because, what's the fastest way to become a millionaire? The joke in our industry is start with $1 billion, right? That's the fastest way to become a millionaire, start with $1 billion. Okay. So how did he go ahead and earn $2 million? Well, he borrowed a bunch of money from friends and family, turned 100,000 into 2 million. And I go, well, great. What are you doing with it? And he goes, well, that's when I knew he did not sell in time. So the long short was he got into Tesla, rode it all the way up, and then rode that bad boy all the way down. Now he still made some money, don't get me wrong, but so I'm sitting there and we're having dinner at Capitol Grill in Midtown Manhattan, and I'm like, so basically you lied, right? I'm like, you at one point had a fantastic rate of return, but then you didn't cash out of the casino quick enough, and now you're out of luck, right? So, needless to say, we did not move forward in that arrangement. But my point of telling you that story, aside from it being unfortunate, is document your results as best you can, because that's going to be your big marketing, right? What I would also go ahead and tell you to do is, there are different networks, particularly in the hedge fund space and the alternative investment space, that are going to be looking for some of those things. Now, I think some of the big banks will also look for that as well, but they tend to already have their own self-developed algorithm. The alternatives have a little bit of different flexibility and the ability to add like alpha hedge and things like that. So there might be some opportunities, or perhaps they just integrate you into their current team and show you a few new tricks that you haven't learned. We could definitely talk offline about, where you may want to send your resume or where you may want to find some internship opportunities, but that would be my recommendation.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna reach out afterwards.
Yep. And read that book, the Men Who Beat the Stock, just because, again, if you're a math geek like me, some of the stuff that they came up with, you're just like, how the heck did they figure this out? And of course I sit there and think 37% net of fees, annualized rate of returns. And you would not see me work. And I'd be here in a jeans and a polo shirt like a tech billionaire, but I digress. What else? I know we had a couple people join in late here, but what other questions, like what career advice could I give you, having actually sat where, not although I was joking with Jack, not exactly where you sat, because I'm walking around the library. I go, I don't really remember the library, but what other career advice can I give to folks? I will tell you, while we're waiting for people to think, and if you're texting people and planning questions, Jack, that's okay as well. I will say, and it's going to be interesting, right? I remember sitting in classes thinking, how am I ever going to use this in the real world? How am I ever going to do anything here? And I still, to this day, we were talking about, and for those of you who've taken him, Ken Betts is still a professor here, 20 some odd years later. I took him for Finance 1. I refused to take him for Finance 2 and do his project a second time, for those who are familiar with his process. And even to this day, having done that project, I still utilize that when I look at individual positions and I look at some of the numbers. And, so no matter how annoying or, crimping on your free time and your availability, certain things may seem, it really is valuable. It really is educational, and it gives you a different perspective on what's out there. Plus, and I don't know if he still gives this line, but he used to open his lecture with, if I ever see you doing something criminal on the cover of the New York Times, I'm going to revoke your grade in my class. I still think about that, right? Part of my FINRA licenses. So in addition to having my sales licenses, I have my compliance licenses. I always think about that and go, I don't want to end up on the cover of New York Times for personal reasons, but I still always, that little anecdote always still sits with me to be like, is this going to get me, my A, which I did get an A in that class, by the way. Is that going to get my A in Ken Betts's class revoked, or am I on the right side of history here? So just something that, I always go ahead and think about. I wouldn't be surprised if it. Yeah, it's the first statement he did. And we all had to do the project presentation, which was fun, and I was not doing that a second time, but I digress. What other questions? What else can I do to be helpful and valuable to all of you? Aside from the promise of, fame, fortune, riches, and rewards.
Anything related, guys? Accounting, finance.
Well, I'll say this much, right? Leverage this business fraternity for all of its different connections. And I say that because, in my industry, right? When I got out of school and I thought I was, king of everything, right? Like I said, I have a little bit of an ego. I was like, yeah, I'm a finance guy and that's all I need to know. And I have everything. And now I deal with clients and, it's funny. I'm meeting with a prospect on Friday. Guy's worth about $10 million, 65 years old, has a child who has special needs. And we are going to be doing some advanced planning for him across the board. But he is going to need an estate attorney. He is going to need a CPA. And maybe he has some of these already. I certainly don't know them. I need to be introduced to them. By the way, for my business, I constantly need someone who's marketing, getting in front of that next prospect, in front of that next pipeline, someone to actually go ahead and have management experience and leadership, right? All these things that I've been able to thankfully encapsulate over the course of a 20-year career. Again, I joke with Jack that the hair choice is an aesthetic one, but if it wasn't, I really wouldn't have anything left. Leverage each other, learn from each other now so that you can get some core foundational skills that your peers, I guarantee, are not going to have. And I know this because I still work with them every day and they don't know what the heck they're talking about. There's actually, and I say this to clients when having the conversation, there's the Five Guys story, not the burger chain, right? For those who are getting hungry because it's dinner time, right? But every client has a financial advisor, an insurance professional, a CPA, an attorney, and a family friend who thinks they know everything about the stock market, right? That's the Five Guys. And each of those five tells a different story and has a different value proposition, and they're all competing with each other. And the person who's most likely to win the business is the one to figure out how to marry everything together. So the more you know about each of those individual pieces, the more effective you're going to be, right? Thankfully, I share a marital bed with my CPA, so that makes the tax planning a little bit easier. But I have, she hasn't let me engage in polygamy to get the attorney and everything else in there as well. So being able to, go ahead and leverage that. So, and plus it never hurts to have a network of people to go ahead and rely upon and to have conversations, because you never know where, those opportunities are going to come from. Actually, one of my biggest source of prospects in building my business came from a family friend who has known me literally since the day I was born, who I have, when I say like a very small account that I have as a favor for him, that it's a small IRA. And he's like, hey, I can get you in front of, the union membership of the NYPD and, New Jersey PBA. Okay. And now I'm one of the top advisors for, North Jersey Police and Fire. So having those connections, having those relationships never hurts. What else? What other questions before I keep digging in my pocket for sagely advice? All right, so we have 15 minutes, so I'll take up a little bit more time. And simply because this is a passion project, one of the things, sorry, I'm going to talk politics for a second, even though it's recorded. So one of the interesting things that has come up, just to give insight into the business world, and it's just such a hot button topic. And actually, I was joking with Jag, and this is a true story. My business partner and I did a webinar the night of the Biden-Trump debate. And I opened that presentation with, in 2 hours, everything that we're talking about during this presentation is going to go completely to hell. I did not realize how accurate I would be in that statement. And that's not saying which side of the aisle I lean. as I like to say, I'm fortunate enough to serve clients on both sides of the aisle who both think that no matter who wins, the country's going to hell, which was part of the reason we put on the webinar, but I digress. So one of the interesting things, and again, as folks who are looking at different finances and investing in the stock market and how an election actually impacts everything, here's some fun historical facts for you to go ahead and take a look at as you watch the stock market over the next 6 weeks. So, we did an analysis, and you can Google this and fact check me if you want, but since 1940, there have only been 2 presidential election year stock markets that have been negative. Anyone want to guess what they were? '20 wasn't negative. 2020 was actually insanely positive, believe it or not. In March, it was very negative, but by the end of the year, it was positive. So there were 2 since 1940. One of them I mentioned several times already. Have I put everyone to sleep that they don't remember?
Was it 2008 and then 2000?
There you go. Someone fired up the Google machine, but nice job, Andrew. And the reason I say that, right now, was there something happening in the economy in 2008? Last I checked, I know some of you were barely alive at that point, but was there the Great Recession? The Great Recession is what it was known. And for those who, wait, was anyone here born prior to 2000? Is there anyone? God, I'm old. But in terms of the year 2000, that was the tech bubble bursting. Okay. And I point that out is that the government impact on what's happening in the financial markets and the economy really doesn't have a major impact. Now, that doesn't mean that it doesn't have an impact on tax law and other long-term changes and how businesses adjust their hiring practices and look for different deductions and all these sort of other things. But in terms of the actual stock market, it really all varies on the health of the economy. And if the economy is going well, which as we've seen kind of inflation start to move down, unemployment thankfully has been holding steady, although I'm keeping tabs on what this month's numbers are going to be. We're actually in a pretty good environment overall, right? Powell's goal during his rate increases was actually to create a pseudo recession, which even though we weren't under the technical definition of it, he actually did a pretty good job. So for those of you graduating, you might actually have an opportunity to get some jobs. So fingers crossed for each of you in that front. And again, if you're ever looking for opportunities, always go ahead and give me a shout. I have a prediction. I will mention offline to Jack what my official prediction is going to be, because that I do not want recorded, simply to where I expect. However, I will say 2 big things that, again, if you take away nothing from what I've said here, is always constantly learn, constantly consume information, and to do so in an effective way. The things that I'm looking forward to are, or I'm curious to how they play out, are what's going to happen with tax legislation in 2025, because the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, the non-business policies are set to expire. And even Republicans who have voted for the original TCJA have said they have no way of paying for the extension. So that's going to be having an impact, as well as the impact on corporate taxes and the impact on the estate tax. Those are all various things that, for those of you, particularly finance majors and accounting majors, and even your parents, may have questions about what's going to go ahead and come up. So I'm very curious to see what's going to happen. And once we see what happens in the election, we'll have a better idea on policy, but I'll leave that tickler there. But offline, we can go ahead and have a more in-depth conversation around that. So with that being said, we have 9 minutes left. I'll open it one more time for any questions, comments, thoughts, concern. It's again, just little shout out. It's great seeing soon to be future FDU alumni. Again, thank you, Jack, for having me here. I am super fortunate to have gone to this university and the experience that I have, and I wouldn't trade anything in the world. So it's great to be here now as a leader, as an alumni, and to greet you all the same over the coming years. So with that, any other questions?
members, candidates, please stay on. I will send out Brian's info if anybody wants it on Zoom. I will. Please pick up business card. Please connect with him on LinkedIn. And okay. My announcements. Okay. Alrighty, members. By the way, for our Metro members, is the did the box, I emailed Paige about the donation box. Is it outside the Silverman office or is it not? Because if not, I will ask her tomorrow because I am working the Hall of Fame gala. If anyway, I know Giselle and Jason, I know you're both Metro members. Has she did that yet or?
So I was planning on bringing the donations in tomorrow, so I will let you know. Not, I guess I could always store them like in her back room until she brings it out. I don't know if that's fine. Just
Okay, yeah.
the bag so I can forward.
Yeah, I was just wondering, because I emailed her earlier in the week, asking her if she could get a box going for us, so I was just wondering what you guys were wanting to do with that. Okay. Alrighty, so as far as next week goes, next week is fall break, so there will be no meeting for BAP next week. However, for those who need to make up their attendance requirement, there are many attendance makeup events that you guys can make up your attendance requirement with. If my MacBook would like to work today and load, bear with me on this. The next speaker that will be coming in, not this week, sorry, not next week, but the following week will be PKF. I think it will either be Ashley Klink or Kaylee Denellen, who usually, I think either one of them usually comes in and speak to us. That will be 23rd, same time, same place. All right, now that I got this going here. Okay. No, not that. Well, I am getting that up actually. Remember donations for Hurricane Helene. The deadline is by October 30th. Again, all members and candidates is a requirement for your BAP procedure, so please do so because all right, so here's my, I always gotta scroll down to get to the end of the, okay, here we go. Week of the 13th. Okay, so there's going to be 4 attendance makeup events that again are all optional if anybody needs to make up their attendance. So Tuesday, October 15th, BAP Nationals will be hosting a DEI live session from 7 to 8. For that event, you must pre-register for it. Again, all the links will be sent out Monday on Web Campus and through email. On the 16th, NJCPA will be hosting their Issues Watch live professional issues update webinar from 12 o'clock to 1:15 p.m. You need to have an NJCPA student membership account, so please go on Web Campus and look at the directions on how to get yourself a free NJCPA account. And then on the 17th, there's gonna be 2 events. The first one, NJCPA, they're hosting a virtual event sponsored by BAP Nationals from 6 to 7. That is optional. And then Thursday, Wiss & Co will be holding their annual open house. That is from 5 to 7 p.m. That event will be an in-person event. The location will be posted on Monday. For that event, if anyone is planning on going to that for their attendance makeup event, there will be very specific instructions for the reflection paper for that event only. So please just bear that in mind. But those will be your events for attendance makeup events for next week. And as far as that goes, tutoring for those who came in late, tutoring hours have changed. And days, so Mondays and Tuesdays will be 3 o'clock, 6 p.m. and then Wednesday from 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. The link is remaining the same, but the times of days just have been changed around. Again, if you know of anyone who was not here today, please let them know to watch the recording as it'll be uploaded later tonight. But with that being said, if anybody has any other last minute questions or comments for me or the e-board or the advisors, please speak now or forever hold your peace.
Can you put the attendance up?
Oh yeah, I forgot. For those who need to get the attendance up, thank you, Andrew, for reminding me of that. For those who did not come in late for the attendance, please do so. I always forget to post at the end. All right, please do that. Everyone got that. All righty. All right, good. Thank you, Elliot. That. All right, hopefully everyone got that. All right, everyone.
Can you also put his information in the chat?
Yes, yes, I will do that right now, actually. Let me put that in the chat for everyone. Should type in the right thing. Okay. All right, I just put his contact info in the chat. So what? Should we get it? Should text. Okay. Joe. Alrighty, so if that is it, that'll be it for this week. Hope everyone enjoys your break, your fall break. And again, if you need to get your tutoring hours in, the time to do that is now because midterms are coming up. So get them in while you still can. But with that being said, that's it. We'll see you all in 2 weeks on the 23rd from PKF. O'Connor's Davies will be coming in to speak to us, and she will be coming in person. So dress code will be business casual if you're planning on coming in person. So that being said, that's it. Great rest of your week. We'll see you all here in 2 weeks.
So will I fall again? I'm scared of heights, yeah.